So the prompt we have today is, if you could have dinner with any philosopher, who would it be?
Great.
And the answer written down here is, I think I'd choose Marcus Aurelius.
Which is such a fascinating answer. I mean, it completely upends the traditional expectation of that prompt.
Yeah, totally. Because you expect someone to say Socrates or, Kant or Descartes.
Exactly. You expect an academic, someone whose entire existence was dedicated to the theoretical.
Right, a guy who constructed these elegant systems of thought from the safety of a university or like a sunlit Athenian courtyard.
But choosing an ancient Roman emperor completely shifts the landscape. You are bypassing the professional thinkers entirely.
You're choosing a man who held absolute terrifying power over the known world.
It is the absolute definition of philosophy forged in the fires of reality. We are looking at a man whose philosophical journal, the text we now know as the Meditations, was not written for publication.
Right, it was just his private diary.
Exactly. He wasn't trying to win arguments or secure a legacy. It was a desperate private mechanism for psychological survival.
And we are drawing today from that remarkable text, alongside extensive historical and biographical data spanning his life from 121 to 180 AD.
Which is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. And the mission of our deep dive into these sources today is to intellectually and imaginatively bring the specific dinner party to life for you.
We want to figure out exactly who is sitting across the table from you.
Yeah, we want to hear what the conversation sounds like, because when someone chooses Marcus Aurelius, they are intuitively looking for his specific brand of Stoicism.
It's a highly practical, battle-tested mental toolkit.
A toolkit for surviving the chaos, the grief, and the unrelenting pressures of your daily life.
But to understand the philosophy, you really have to understand the staggering weight of the man's reality.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the popular imagination of a Roman emperor usually conjures images of just total depravity and paranoia.
Absolute power corrupting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We think of Nero's theatrical madness or Caligula's cruelty.
But Marcus is this striking deviation from that historical trope. He did not ruthlessly climb a political ladder.
No, he didn't assassinate rivals to seize the purple. He was completely thrust into the imperial machinery.
The history points out he was handpicked as a boy by the Emperor Hadrian. Hadrian noticed his serious nature.
And he was subsequently adopted by Antoninus Pius to secure the line of succession. He was quite literally groomed for the throne.
And the sources use a very specific term for his reaction to this ultimate promotion, right?
Yes, horror imperii.
Horror imperii, a genuine visceral fear of imperial power.
When he was informed that he was being adopted into the imperial line, the historical records tell us he greeted the news with profound sadness.
He actually wept, didn't he?
He did. He had to be compelled to move into the imperial palace. He despised what the Romans called the olicum vestigium.
Which means what, exactly?
It translates roughly to the pomp and the suffocating theater of the court.
We really need to look at the mechanism of that reluctance, because it wasn't just him being modest.
No, it was a genuine dread.
If we translate that to a modern context for you listening, it's not like being handed the CEO job of a massive corporation.
It's way heavier than that.
It's more akin to being placed inside a sensory overload chamber where the fate of millions of lives depends on your every flinch.
While your deepest, most fundamental desire is to be in an isolation tank, studying the mechanics of the universe.
Exactly. He wanted quiet simplicity, and instead he was handed a crumbling empire.
That tension is everywhere in his early letters. He wrote to his beloved rhetoric tutor, Fronto, describing the sheer bureaucratic suffocation of the role.
There's that one letter where he talks about being exhausted.
Yeah, he mentions being completely out of breath from dictating nearly 30 letters in a single sitting. The burden was immediate and suffocating.
But the critical takeaway from his biographical data is that his Stoic training fundamentally rewired his response to that burden.
Right, the philosophy dictated that a human being must fulfill their social duty. He couldn't flee to the countryside.
He had to stand his post.
And that post was a nightmare. The era of his reign was practically apocalyptic. He was handed a world on fire.
Quite literally in some regions.
Right.
As soon as he ascended to the throne, the geopolitical stability of the empire just shattered.
He faced the Parthian War in the east, which was a massive conflict that rapidly drained the empire's resources.
And then right after that came the Marcomannic Wars against this massive coalition of Germanic tribes.
Which forced this philosophically inclined intellectual to spend years away from Rome,
Just shivering in military tents on the freezing Danubian frontier.
commanding legions in brutal hand-to-hand warfare.
And nature wasn't exactly cooperating either. There was a devastating flood of the Tiber River.
Oh yeah, that flood wiped out agricultural reserves and caused widespread famine in Rome. It threatened mass riots.
And we haven't even touched on the Antonine Plague.
The plague is arguably the defining catastrophe of his reign. It broke out around 165 AD.
Likely brought back by soldiers returning from the Eastern campaigns, right?
Yes, and modern epidemiologists suspect it was a severe strain of smallpox. The sheer scale of the devastation is hard to comprehend.
The numbers are wild.
Estimates suggest it killed anywhere from 5 to 10 million people across the empire.
10 million people.
It decimated the civilian population, wiped out entire legions, and completely destabilized the Roman economy.
The famous physician Galen was working in Rome at the time.
And he described just horrifying symptoms.
So the man sitting across the dinner table from you isn't pontificating about the abstract nature of virtue from a comfortable armchair.
Not at all. He is formulating his philosophy while standing amidst famine, global pandemic, and endless warfare.
The meditations are the private coping mechanisms of a man bearing the absolute maximum weight of human responsibility.
That is the lens through which we have to view everything he says.
Which brings us to the actual physical reality of this imaginary dinner. When he walks into the room, the contrast would be intense.
The contrast between the expectation of imperial Roman grandeur and the reality of Marcus Aurelius would be incredibly jarring.
We have to throw out the Hollywood stereotypes immediately.
Yeah, no purple silk robes.
No reclining on couches while attendants peel grapes and feed them to him.
The historical sources are remarkably consistent about his physical habits, which were steeped in Stoic asceticism.
Or ascesis, right?
Yes, ascesis, the physical training of the mind. Even from the age of 11, influenced by a tutor named Dichotomy, Marcus adopted the dress and the rigorous habits of a Greek philosopher.
So what would he be wearing to this dinner?
He would likely arrive wearing a tribon, which is a very rough, simple woolen cloak.
Wow. And as a child, he actually forced himself to sleep on the bare ground to harden his body and mind.
Right, until his mother finally intervened and made him sleep in a bed. He was fundamentally averse to luxury.
Because he understood that luxury softens the mind's ability to withstand actual adversity.
Exactly. And his diet was the same. The waiter handed him the menu, and he's not ordering a lavish feast.
The sources indicate he was incredibly abstemious, partly due to his fragile health. I mean, he suffered from chronic stomach and chest issues.
But also out of deep philosophical principle. He could go an entire day without eating.
And when he did eat,
It was meant strictly for sustenance. He idolized his adoptive father, Antoninus Pius, and adopted many of his habits.
Antoninus used to snack on dry bread just to stay awake during morning audiences, right?
Yeah, and he ate simple Alpine cheese for his meals. Marcus would likely order the exact same thing at our dinner.
Dry bread, a piece of cheese, just the biological minimum required to keep the body functioning so the mind could do its work.
Exactly.
Seeing a man in a rough cloak eating dry bread raises a natural question about his demeanor, though.
I can imagine.
Because the stereotype of the Stoic is the emotionless brick wall. Would he just sit there, staring sternly, radiating this oppressive, judgmental gravity while you try to enjoy a glass of wine?
It's a completely understandable assumption based on the modern bastardization of the word Stoic, but the historical sources beautifully dismantle that image.
They really do.
Yes. One biographer noted that a bust of him portrayed a grave young man, and he undoubtedly took the immense responsibilities of his life seriously.
But the meditations explicitly reveal a man who actively cultivated warmth and lightness.
He credits his mentor Maximus for this in Book 1.
Right. Book 1 is essentially a catalog of gratitude to everyone who shaped his character.
Yes, and he writes that Maximus taught him to have a good gift of humor. He observed that Maximus was never in a hurry, never at a loss.
Not a facile smiler, but entirely free of suspicion and petty anger.
Marcus admired and internalized that gentle, cheerful grounding.
There's also the Roman concept of being civiliter, which means lacking pomp or ruling as a citizen rather than a despot.
He didn't demand the sycophancy that usually surrounds power. He practically mandated free speech in Rome.
There's a brilliant historical anecdote about a contemporary comedy writer named Marcus.
Oh, this is a great story. Marcus wrote plays that openly mocked Marcus and his co-emperor Lucius Verus.
Which, in almost any other era of Roman history, that is an immediate death sentence.
Without a doubt. But Marcus not only allowed the plays to be performed, but he also suffered no retribution against the writer.
He was incredibly tolerant of a joke at his own expense. He didn't take his ego seriously.
He took his duty seriously, and the surviving correspondence between Marcus and Fronto completely shatters the emotionless stereotype too.
Those letters are brimming with an affection that feels almost shockingly vulnerable for an emperor.
The emotional intelligence on display is profound. The Stoics didn't aim to eliminate emotion.
They aim to eliminate the passions.
Right, which in their Greek terminology meant irrational destructive impulses like terror, rage, and destructive lust.
They actively cultivated the eupathia, the good emotions like rational joy, wishfulness, and deep affection.
You see that so clearly when he writes to Fronto. He says things like, "Farewell, my Fronto, wherever you are, my most sweet love and delight."
How is it between you and me? I love you and you're not here. It's so poetic.
And when Fronto is suffering from one of his frequent illnesses, Marcus doesn't offer cold, detached advice.
No, he writes and literally begs the gods that Fronto's physical agony be transferred into his own body.
He says, "Of my own accord with every kind of discomfort." That is the antithesis of a cold, unfeeling robot.
So across the dinner table, you have a man wielding ultimate power who is completely humble.
He is rigorously disciplined, eating simple bread, yet he possesses a sharp gift of humor.
He is deeply serious about the state of the world, but fiercely affectionate toward the people in it.
That warmth is what allows us to push past the superficial and bring our actual daily struggles to the table.
Exactly. If I have Marcus Aurelius sitting across from me, I'm not going to waste time debating abstract metaphysical theories about the cosmos.
You want practical advice.
I'm going to ask him about the mundane realities that constantly trip me up. And the most universal mundane struggle, the one that sets the tone for everything else, is simply the friction of getting out of bed in the morning.
It sounds trivial, but it is the foundational battle of human volition, isn't it?
It really is. The alarm rings, the external world demands your presence, but the bed is warm and comfortable.
So what would you ask him?
I would ask him, you were the emperor, you commanded legions, you had servants who could have fanned you while you slept until noon, and nobody would have dared question you. How did you force yourself up when you were physically exhausted and dreading the day?
His answer to that in Book 5 of the Meditations is perhaps one of the most famous passages in the entire text.
That's so good.
And it relies heavily on Stoic physics and teleology, which is the idea that the universe has a rational order and purpose.
Right.
He writes, "In the morning, when you find yourself unwilling to rise, have this thought at hand. I arise to the proper business of man, and shall I repine at setting about that work for which I was born and brought into the world?"
He immediately frames hitting the snooze button not as a minor laziness, but as an existential crisis of purpose.
He interrogates his own reluctance. He writes, "Am I equipped for nothing but to lie among the bedclothes and keep warm? But," you say, "it is more pleasant so."
I love the intellectual honesty there. He validates the physical reality. Yes, the bed is pleasant. He isn't pretending it isn't cold outside.
But then he connects his individual human action to the macrocosm of nature. He says, "Do you not see the smallest plants, the little sparrows, the ants, the spiders, the bees, all doing their part and working for order in the universe as far as in them lies?"
And will you refuse the part in this design which is laid on man?
The mechanism he's using here is brilliant.
So when your alarm goes off, Marcus is arguing that staying in bed is a rejection of the logos.
The universal reason that organizes reality.
Right. The spider spins its web because that is the nature of a spider. The bee pollinates because that is its fundamental design.
And as a human being, your fundamental design is rational social action.
When you hide under the covers, you are refusing to play your part in the ecosystem. You are acting contrary to nature.
He addresses the counter-argument of fatigue directly, too. He acknowledges that nature appoints a measure for rest, just as it does for eating and drinking.
But he notes that when you oversleep, you are going beyond what is necessary. You are failing to fill your measure of action.
The concluding thought of that passage is a sharp psychological critique. He says, "You do not love yourself. If you did, you would love your nature and its purpose."
That cuts deep, because we tend to view sleeping in as a form of self-care or self-love.
Marcus flips that entirely. Oversleeping is a failure of self-love because it actively denies your potential and your fundamental humanity.
It's a rigorous standard, but it is highly effective cognitive framing to start the day.
Absolutely.
But let's say you successfully apply that. You get out of bed, you accept your role in the cosmic ecosystem, and you go out into the world.
Then what?
Almost immediately, you are confronted with other people. You run into the rude barista, the coworker playing aggressive office politics, the person cutting you off in traffic.
Or the sheer toxicity of internet trolls.
Yes. So how does the Emperor of Rome, a man who dealt with treason, incompetent generals, and constant betrayal, handle annoying people?
He anticipates this daily friction. In Book 2, he essentially writes out a mental preparation routine for dealing with difficult people.
He reminds himself that he will inevitably meet the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, and the envious.
But then he applies the mechanism of Stoic epistemology. He writes, all reasoning beings are created for one another, that to bear with them is a part of justice, and that they cannot help their sin.
They cannot help their sin. That requires a massive perspective shift.
It does. He's looking at malice or rudeness not as a personal attack on him, but as a kind of moral ignorance on their part.
It traces back to the Socratic paradox that no one does wrong willingly, right?
Exactly. They do wrong because their internal compass for what is good and bad is broken. They mistake a petty victory in an argument for actual good.
So once you view a troll not as a villain, but as someone suffering from moral blindness, anger is replaced by pity, or at least tolerance.
Furthermore, in Book 6, he drops the ultimate Stoic tactical advice. He says, the best revenge is not to copy him that wronged you.
That is the ultimate cognitive circuit breaker. When someone is rude to you, your immediate biological instinct is to return the rudeness.
You want to show them how it feels.
Exactly. But Marcus is pointing out the absurdity of that instinct. Why would you voluntarily lower your own character, damage your own integrity, just to mimic the behavior of someone you despise?
Exactly. You're letting their broken compass dictate your direction.
But there is a specific passage on dealing with people that I find deeply hilarious and profoundly useful. It's what I think of as the foul breath rule.
Oh, yes. It perfectly illustrates his ability to combine high philosophical theory with grounded physical reality.
He writes in Book 5, "Are you angry with one whose armpits smell or whose breath is foul? What is the use? His mouth or his armpits are so, and the consequence must follow."
It's pure physics, cause and effect.
Right. And then he continues, imagining the person arguing back. "But you say, man is a reasonable being and can see what is offending."
And Marcus answers, very well, you too have reason. Use your reason to move his. Instruct, admonish him. If he listens, you will cure him, and there will be no reason for anger.
The underlying mechanism here is the Stoic concept of the dichotomy of control, which we see woven throughout his entire worldview.
You do not control the other person's hygiene, nor do you control their obnoxious behavior.
Their rudeness is an objective fact of nature, like rain or gravity.
Getting angry at someone's bad character is as irrational as getting angry that a dog barks or an apple falls from a tree.
It transforms how you navigate the world. People's bad behavior, their selfishness, their snide comments is just moral halitosis.
It is a condition they possess.
Your anger does absolutely nothing to cure their condition. It only poisons your own peace of mind.
You either use your rational faculties to instruct them and correct the behavior, or, if they are unreachable, you accept it as a physical reality.
You move past it without letting it penetrate your own psychological defenses.
But, it's one thing to use rational filtering to tolerate a rude coworker or a difficult morning routine.
Right, that's the small stuff.
That same mental muscle has to be infinitely stronger to survive the next level of the conversation. Because at this point in the dinner, we have to address the profound suffering he endured.
Because you listening today might be facing realities far darker than an annoying email. Chronic illness, the loss of a career, the death of a loved one.
Does Marcus Aurelius actually have the philosophical authority to speak on catastrophic grief?
The biographical sources are devastating on this front. His personal life was a relentless parade of tragedy.
Marcus and his wife, Faustina the Younger, had a remarkable and long marriage by Roman standards. Together, they had at least 13 children, including 2 sets of twins.
But infant and child mortality in the ancient world was merciless.
And the imperial family had no special immunity. The sheer volume of loss they suffered is difficult to even verbalize.
It's heartbreaking. A daughter, Domitia, died as a toddler. Twin boys, born in 149, barely survived their infancy.
Another son, Tiberius Aelius, died young. Another unnamed child died around 158.
He watched child after child succumb to illness. He had to stand in the mausoleum of Hadrian time and time again, burying his own future.
Combine this intensely personal, repeated psychological trauma with the macro trauma of the Antonine Plague, ravaging the millions of citizens he was sworn to protect.
while simultaneously managing the slaughter of the Marcomannic Wars.
So leaning across the table, the question is raw. How?
How does a human mind not shatter under that pressure? How do you bury your children, watch your empire bleed, and not turn utterly bitter, cynical, or completely shut down?
He survived by constructing what later philosophers would call the Inner Citadel.
The Inner Citadel.
The Stoics believed that the mind, the hegemonicon or ruling faculty, could be trained to become an impenetrable fortress.
In Book 4, he critiques the common human desire to escape stress through physical relocation.
He writes, "Men seek retirement in the country, on the seacoast, in the mountains, and you too have frequent longings for such distractions."
Which is the modern equivalent of, I need a vacation, or if I could just move to a quiet cabin, my anxiety would disappear.
But Marcus recognized that geography doesn't cure the soul, because you bring your mind with you.
He says, yet surely this is great folly, since you may retire into yourself at any hour you please. Nowhere can a man find any retreat more quiet and more full of leisure than in his own soul.
It's a powerful idea.
I have to challenge this, though, because to a modern ear, telling a grieving parent, a man who has just buried his toddler, to retire into his soul sounds dangerously close to toxic emotional repression.
I can see why it sounds that way.
Modern psychology emphasizes feeling our feelings, processing the trauma. In the text, Marcus literally tells himself, suppress the thought, and the cry, I am hurt, is gone. Suppress, I am hurt, and you suppress the injury.
It sounds harsh.
If he is just bottling up the agony of losing 13 children, isn't his inner citadel actually just a prison of denial?
That is the essential pushback, and it requires us to understand the precise mechanics of Stoic emotional theory. It is absolutely not denial, nor is it the suppression of biological reality.
Okay, so how does it work?
The Stoics categorized emotions into two distinct phases. The first phase they called propatheiai, which translates to pre-emotions or initial involuntary impressions.
So the physical shock, the tears, the immediate pang in the chest when tragedy strikes.
Precisely. Marcus would never deny that tears fall when a child dies.
Yeah.
That is biology. That is nature. The Stoic sage feels that initial shock, just like anyone else.
So what's the second phase?
The crucial difference lies in the second phase, the ascent of the ruling faculty. After the involuntary shock, the mind proposes a judgment. It says, this event is a terrible, unbearable evil, and my life is permanently destroyed.
And the untrained mind just automatically assents to that judgment.
Right, and that assent generates the secondary prolonged agony, the destructive passion.
So when he says suppress the thought and you suppress the injury, he isn't saying pretend the child didn't die.
No, he is saying sever the objective reality of the biological event from the subjective catastrophic narrative you are spinning around it.
The event is a profoundly sad reality of nature. But the judgment that you are a victim of an unfair universe, that you cannot go on, that is a choice.
You can withdraw assent from that judgment?
He applies a similarly rigorous logic to physical pain.
He suffered from chronic chest and stomach pains, likely exacerbated by his austere lifestyle.
He reasoned, pain which cannot be borne brings us deliverance. Pain that lasts must needs be bearable.
It is a stark, almost clinical algorithm for enduring suffering. If the pain is truly unbearable, it will kill you and the pain will cease.
If you are still breathing, the pain is by definition bearable. Therefore, your duty is to bear it without adding the extra layer of mental complaining.
And he codifies this resilience in what is arguably the most visceral and powerful metaphor in the Meditations.
The promontory. He writes, be like a promontory against which the waves are always breaking. You can picture this massive, jagged cliff face jutting out into a violent, churning ocean.
The ocean is endless. The waves are relentless.
It stands fast, he writes, and stills the waters that rage around it.
It is the ultimate epistemological stance against an unpredictable universe. He writes that when a wave of misfortune hits you, your immediate cognitive reaction shouldn't be, wretched am I that this has befallen me.
Your trained, deliberate response must be, happy am I who, though this has befallen me, can still remain without sorrow, neither broken by the present nor dreading the future.
The waves is going to crash over you regardless. The wave of grief, the wave of economic ruin, the wave of illness.
You cannot command the ocean to stop. The only variable you control is your structural integrity.
Are you a piece of fragile driftwood that shatters on impact? Or have you trained your hegemonicon to be the stone cliff?
The wave hits the cliff, it explodes in a spray of chaos, but eventually the water recedes, the foam settles, and the stone remains exactly where it was.
He adds a brilliant concluding thought to that metaphor. He says, the like might have befallen anyone, but everyone would not have endured it unpained.
The tragedy isn't what happened, it's allowing what happened to destroy your character.
True good fortune is your capacity to bear the unbearable while maintaining your virtue.
So as the plates from our imaginary dinner are cleared away and the conversation shifts into the late night hours, the topics naturally gravitate toward the ultimate conclusions of a life.
Legacy, the future, and mortality.
I would look at this man who is currently carved in marble across the globe, whose face is stamped on the coinage of the greatest empire on earth, and ask, "You ruled the world. Your name will echo for millennia. Doesn't your legacy offer some comfort? Doesn't the fame matter?"
His response to that would be a masterclass in cosmic perspective, a technique the Stoics called the view from above.
He viewed human fame as mathematically worthless.
Worthless. That's jarring coming from an emperor who literally had monuments built to him.
But he regularly zoomed out his perspective to view time as an infinite river. From that vantage point, human fame is just an acoustic trick of history.
He observes in his journal that the longest posthumous fame is preserved by what he calls poor mortals soon themselves to die.
It's the realization that the people tasked with remembering you are just as fragile and temporary as you are.
He writes explicitly about this. He says, Alexander of Macedon and his muleteer, when they died, were in a like condition. They were either alike resumed into the seminal source of all things, or alike dispersed among the atoms.
Death is the absolute, unyielding equalizer, the conqueror who bent the world to his will, and the nameless peasant who drove his supply carts end up rotting in the exact same soil.
Governed by the exact same laws of physics.
He also recognized that memory isn't just lost individually, it's lost civilizationally.
He points to whole cities dying. Pompeii and Herculaneum were wiped off the map by Vesuvius less than a century before he was born.
He notes that a name is but so much empty sound and echo.
He compares the accumulation of fame to heaps of sand driven one upon another on a beach. The later drifts inevitably bury the ones that came before.
No matter how great your accomplishments, the endless tide of time will bury them.
The end of fame, he concluded, is to be forgotten.
But if fame is meaningless, and if your legacy is destined to be buried, how does a person deal with the acute, immediate disappointment of what they leave behind in the present?
Because historically, this is the great tragedy of Marcus Aurelius' life.
He was the last of what Machiavelli later called the 5 good emperors, right?
Yes, a period where succession wasn't based on blood, but on adopting the most capable man for the job. Marcus broke that golden streak.
It is the darkest irony of his reign, and historians have debated it for centuries. He allowed the succession to fall to his biological son, Commodus.
And Commodus was a disaster.
This historian Cassius Dio explicitly stated that with the ascension of Commodus, the Roman Empire descended from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust.
Commodus was vain, cruel, and erratic, effectively ending the Pax Romana.
So how could Marcus, this incredibly wise philosopher, be so blind?
It wasn't blindness. It was likely a cold, grim calculation based on the reality of Roman power dynamics.
Unlike his predecessors who adopted heirs, Marcus had a living, breathing, biological son.
In Roman political culture, if he had bypassed Commodus and named a general as his successor, it would have almost certainly triggered a catastrophic, bloody civil war upon his death.
He likely saw appointing Commodus as the lesser of 2 terrible evils.
But the personal disappointment must have been staggering. Cassius Dio notes that Marcus reared and educated his son in the best possible way, but was vastly disappointed in him.
How did Marcus reconcile spending his entire life holding a fragile world together, only to realize he was handing the keys to someone who would tear it down?
By falling back on the ultimate Stoic defense mechanism, the strict boundary of his own agency.
He understood deeply that he was only responsible for his own actions, his teaching, his parenting, his duty to the state.
He was fundamentally not responsible for the choices his son would make, nor was he responsible for the ultimate fate of Rome.
He played his role perfectly, and he accepted that the outcome was dictated by fate. He never lost his equanimity in his final days.
Which brings us to the end of his timeline. He died in 180 AD, not in a glorious battle, but in a military camp near modern-day Vienna.
Likely from the plague or another illness, his body finally failing after decades of grueling exhaustion.
How did he view his own impending death?
With a profound, almost beautiful tranquility. He saw death not as a shadowy terror or a divine punishment, but merely as a mechanical process of nature.
He writes, "Death, like birth, is a mystery of nature. The one a compounding of elements, the other a resolution into the same.
It's just a transition of state, the atoms coming together, the atoms breaking apart.
He insisted that a rational being shouldn't be ostentatiously contemptuous of death, nor fear it, but await its coming as one of the standard operations of nature.
He provides this stunning, peaceful analogy for the end of life. He says, "Spend, then, the fleeting remnant of your time in a spirit that accords with nature, and depart contentedly. So the olive falls when it is grown ripe, blessing the ground from whence it sprung, and thankful to the tree that bore it."
The ripe olive falling from the tree. It isn't a tragedy. It isn't an injustice.
It is simply the completion of its natural cycle. It falls to nourish the earth that grew it. And as Marcus frequently reminded himself, nothing natural can be evil.
It perfectly distills his worldview.
Yeah.
You arrive, you do your duty, you bear the unbearable with dignity, and when the time comes to dissolve back into the universe, you go with deep gratitude.
So the imaginary dinner concludes. We step away from the table, out of the ancient world, and return directly to the reality of you, the listener, today. We have to synthesize this.
Why does a conversation with a man who has been dead for nearly 2 millennia matter to someone navigating the 21st century?
Because the Meditations isn't an artifact of history. It is an active, practical, mental operating system designed to keep a human being sane in an inherently insane and unpredictable world.
Let's look at the core processing unit of that operating system. We've touched on it throughout the dinner, but it deserves to be clearly defined.
The Dichotomy of Control.
Marcus lays out the cognitive mechanics of this perfectly in Book 8. He writes, "If you are grieved about anything external, it is not the thing itself which afflicts you, but your judgment about it."
That one sentence, if truly internalized, changes the trajectory of a life. The traffic jam you are stuck in isn't radiating anger into your brain.
The objective reality is simply metal boxes moving slowly.
Your judgment that you are entitled to a clear road and that this delay is an injustice is what manufactures your anger.
The passive-aggressive email from a colleague isn't causing you physical stress. Your judgment about what that email means for your status or your future is triggering the cortisol spike.
And here is the liberating mechanism that follows. After identifying that the judgment is the source of the pain, Marcus writes, "This judgment it is in your power to efface."
You cannot delete the traffic jam. You cannot delete the email.
But you hold the absolute sovereign power to delete the judgment within your own mind. If you control your opinion of an event, you control your reality.
It is the ultimate reclamation of agency. But there's another insight he offers that feels specifically targeted at our modern, hyper-connected anxieties.
It's what we might call the paradox of self-esteem.
Found in Book 12, it is a brilliant observation of human contradiction. He writes, "I've wondered often how it comes that, while every man loves himself beyond all others, yet he holds his own opinion of himself in less esteem than the opinion of others."
Reading that today feels like he's looking directly at our social media feeds. We are obsessed with ourselves.
We curate our digital profiles, we track our metrics, we ruminate on our own problems endlessly. We clearly prioritize ourselves above others.
Yet, the second a stranger leaves a negative comment or an acquaintance gives us a strange look, our self-worth entirely collapses.
We inexplicably value the unexamined opinion of a random passerby over our own intimate knowledge of our intentions and character.
He is asking us to expose the absurdity of performing for what he called the babblers. Why do we seek the applause of a fleeting world?
Why do we allow our internal weather to be dictated by people who, as he pointed out earlier, will soon be dust?
If you can sever your self-worth from external validation, you can stop performing. You can redirect all that wasted energy into the only things actually under your control.
Your own integrity, your own justice, and the pursuit of your own truth.
Which brings us back to the original prompt that sparked this entire discussion. When someone says, "I would choose to have dinner with Marcus Aurelius," they're communicating a deep, modern hunger.
They aren't looking for a theoretical lecture on abstract ethics.
And they certainly aren't looking for the generic, hollow, motivational fluff that saturates the modern self-help industry. The empty promises that if you just manifest hard enough, the universe will give you whatever you want.
The universe of Marcus Aurelius does not care what you want. It demands what you owe.
Exactly. People choose Marcus because they are looking for a deeply human, profoundly scarred guide.
They want to sit across from a man who bore the maximum possible weight of human responsibility, who faced the darkest, most terrifying realities of existence.
Relentless war, A collapsing economy, a global pandemic, and the agonizing, repeated death of his own children.
And somehow, despite every reason to shatter, emerged on the other side kind, forgiving, relentlessly disciplined, and at peace.
He isn't just theorizing about resilience. He is the historical proof of concept that the philosophy actually works when the fire reaches your door.
He is the promontory. The wave crashed against him for 60 years, and the stone never broke.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to examine on your own, drawn from a profound assertion Marcus makes about the nature of harm.
He writes, "What hurts not the city, hurts not the citizen."
By city, Marcus is referring to the inner community of your soul, your core character, your ruling faculty, your fundamental integrity.
The question for you to explore as you go back into your day is this.
When you face the inevitable friction of modern life, the anxieties, the financial pressures, the slights from coworkers, the terrifying news cycles, do these things actually harm your city?
Do they possess the physical power to reach inside your mind and fundamentally damage your capacity to be a just, patient, and good human being?
Or are they merely phantom armies, illusions of harm that you are voluntarily allowing through your own gates? Protect your inner city. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the mind of Marcus Aurelius. We will catch you next time.